Welcome to the Compost Pile, a podcast where we break down gardening, homesteading, and more. Join your hosts, David Poole and Aaron Barnhill, as they pile up information and break it down so that you can be more successful in the garden. Hey guys, welcome back to the Compost Pile. My name's David, and today I have Paul Lemoine with me, and we're going to bring you some information about growing eggplants and cucumbers. You might be thinking that maybe those things are not really related, but they are in a sense of when we should get them ready to go and put in the ground. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges and things that you need to be mindful of when you're getting ready to put those out this spring season. So, yeah. When are eggplants and cucumbers something you plant a lot of in your garden?
Not a lot, because they make so much when you do most things right.
I agree that I think sometimes that's one of those ones you could go, like eggplant especially, you could buy one or two plants. You don't need 6 of them if it's just a couple people, because they're so prolific in production. And the same way with cucumbers, especially if you're buying pre-sprouted ones, most of the time you're getting more than one plant in every cell that you plant already. So
Right.
really and truthfully, people are typically planting out more than just a couple, and they don't even realize it.
Right. Yeah. So typically, people will buy a 6-pack of them.
Yeah.
And just like you were saying, you'll have 2 or 3 plants in a 6-pack, and you may just plant that one plug in the ground. Well, you're gonna have 3 primary vines growing, and then you're gonna have the other 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. And you're going to be looking for a big bushel basket and
Yeah,
a bunch of friends to give them to, because they're going to produce.
They'll be covered up everywhere. Yeah, that's. I think those are 2 that people definitely overplant. Last year, I'm not a big eggplant person. I don't really like it, but I've found, because when I think about timing, eggplant is in the nightshade family, so it's in the same family as tomatoes, peppers, potatoes. But interestingly enough, it's really like a late spring into summer crop. It really likes those hot temperatures, and we started using it last year to grow alongside our peppers, blocking out the afternoon sun, giving those peppers a little bit of shade in the afternoon, and we were able to kind of extend our harvest season on those peppers a little bit, not a long amount, but just it helped reduce the temperature, and I thought that was an interesting use of them, even though that I don't care for the taste of them. So
Yeah, and eggplant's easy, and it's very prolific. Just for example, at the Bachelor Garden or Test Garden at the airport, our eggplant bed lasted until, it had to be November. We were still picking, and we were picking them every time we go out there, and you want to pick them on the smaller side. Some people like to get them
real big, yeah.
But the best time to pick them when they're smaller. But we was going out there every day, and it wasn't it's just a small raised bed, but it just kept growing and growing and doing well. And so again, you gotta you gotta make sure you don't plant too many plants. It doesn't take very many. A couple plants is really all you need, and you'll have all the eggplants that you can stand.
One of the things that I find with eggplant that is always interesting is once you harvest an eggplant, I feel like it has the shortest shelf life of almost everything that I like to grow in the spring. Pick it and I put it out, and then like before I know, it's like withering out. And, so that's another thing I found. I don't like to have a lot of them when I harvest, because if I was going to do something with them, I don't have very long to use them compared to some other things that tend to store a little better.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and that's something to remind people, because I like cooking eggplant, like eggplant parmesan.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is you slice up your eggplant, and you lay them out on a cookie sheet, and you sprinkle some salt on there to pull the moisture out. There's very, very high moisture. So going back to what you were saying, is that's why they go bad so fast. They're full of moisture, and to actually prepare one for cooking right, you can't just slice them and bread them up. It just get all soggy.
Yeah. Okay.
So you lay it out on a cookie sheet for about 30 minutes. You put some salt on there, and it draws the moisture out of there, and you pat it dry with some paper towels and everything, and it takes the vast majority of that moisture out, and then it's ready to prepare.
Okay, that's
So
cool. I didn't know that. I
that's
didn't know
why,
that.
Yeah, that's why it does that.
That's awesome. I think, like, when I think about growing eggplant, truthfully, I'd rate it as probably one of the easiest plants to grow, as far as care goes. Outside of like thinking of it like a tomato or a pepper, and knowing that if I want to plant them out like in that beginning of April, maybe when the temperatures are warming up a little bit, and also uh, I find that they're really susceptible to wind. They don't, when we pull them off the truck, the plant trucks, and we get them in, they will wilt
Yeah.
from the time we get them off the truck, and we'll bring them in the warehouse because typically March is really, really windy, and those young plants, it dries the soil out really fast. They just tend to get real droopy, and they get really, really stressed. But outside of getting them started and knowing that I've got to start them like in that 6 to 8 week window to get them to a good size, I find that once I get them started, there's really not much of any issues that I have. I don't really deal with pests because it thrives in the heat.
Loves the heat.
I
Loves
don't
the
really,
humidity.
I don't find that they get blight or any of the common like high humidity diseases that get on potatoes and tomatoes. So it's really, honestly, if you like eggplant, I think it's one of the easiest things that you could put out there,
Yeah.
and actually get something. You're going to get your monies out of it for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. It is one of the easiest ones to maintain, and it's a good point. Once you get them started, so if you're a seed planter and you want to plant them, then you got to start them indoors,
Yep.
and you want to up pot them into some bigger pots and get them to a healthy size before you harden them off to put them outside. Because if you're going to have problems with eggplant, it's going to be early on, and once they're outside and established, you don't have to look at them.
I mean, it's, yeah, I mean,
You got to harvest them.
they're, I mean, because it grows so sizable. We had one this year. So a fiance at home, she's 6 foot tall. We
Yeah.
had an eggplant that was 7 foot tall this year
That's crazy.
in the bed.
Yeah.
So, so it was that tall plus the size of the bed. It was huge.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a tree,
Yeah.
other than maybe giving it a stake to support the center stalk. Like, I don't tend to have to worry about caging them a lot of times, depending on the variety. Some might. But you could need support on them because eggplants do get pretty darn heavy, especially if they're producing a ton at once.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Even if you're picking them when they're smaller, you can skip a couple, 2 or 3 days, and you'll end up some pretty big ones on there. And I'll typically use like a half of a tomato cage, like a short cage, because when they do get heavy, they will lean over. And I've had them fall over and stake them back up, and they were fine. But just to keep them upright, because that fruit does get heavy again because it's full of moisture.
Right, yeah.
It's very heavy.
Yeah, it's. I always think that's interesting. I know, thinking back, like a lot of these plants, they'll, if they do lean over, I mean, a lot of the stuff could technically grow just across the ground, especially in that nightshade family.
Yeah.
I've had tomatoes growing across the ground unintentionally. Peppers will grow just laid over perfectly fine. So it's a pretty resilient plant.
Yep.
I think cucumbers really are the one that people have the most trouble with. And I find, like right now, it's, the date of this recording, it's February 19th, and
Still early.
it's early, and people are asking for cucumber seedlings. And the two things that cucumber seedlings don't like are cool temperatures, which right now the nights are still pretty cool. You come out in the morning, you might still, depending on who you are, you might want a light jacket. They're not going to thrive in those cool temps. And they also, when they're really young, they don't like wind either. And you get them laid over really good, they get stressed and they don't want to like pop back up, I find a lot of times, and really just take off like they do. So I think timing is really important there. When do you find for you in your space is the best time to put them out?
Well, I used to be one of those. You get a week of warm weather,
Yeah.
and say, oh man, I'm gonna get those cucumbers out, and you get them going a little bit, and then you get those stressors coming in where you get temperatures below 60 degrees, and like I said, we're gonna have high winds in February and March especially, and a lot of times they're just not going to survive. And if they do survive, they'll sit there.
Yep.
You won't see them grow one little bit, and they just look puny, and so I did an experiment a couple years ago, and I planted some early ones, and kept them going. And they struggled, and then I planted some by seed around April 1st when the weather had settled out. And of course, those passed up the ones I've been
Really?
babying
Okay.
for over a month, and I was thinking, well, why even do that? So, kind of April 1st is my target date, generally, because I know it's warm enough then where it's going to be pretty stable. I mean, every now and then you might get some little quick cool spell, but I know by then they're usually going to make it pretty
Right,
well.
and then they technically can be considered like they can grow into that hot season. They'll do pretty good up and through the early summer, for the most part. I mean,
Yeah, 90 degrees is kind of the number that you look at on cucumbers.
Okay.
Actually, even on eggplant. So, cucumbers, the soil temperature has to be at 60 degrees minimum. And that's still maybe a little on the cool side. Because you can go check it out there right now. And that's probably about what it is. So,
yeah, we're
they'll
getting
germinate.
close there. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll germinate. Yeah. But it's that other thing. Is getting them up and sustaining them and having some good, vigorous, healthy growth. Which
So
you're just not going to have.
Ideally, what we're talking about is we want that consistent temperature where it's not just like the soil temperature is 65, but also the ambient temperature in the air it causes it to become stressed out.
That's right.
And stressful plants,
They're
just
fighting.
they're
I
fighting.
mean, it's like it's like a little baby that you're not feeding right.
Yep.
And stressed all the time. They're not gonna be very prolific. I guess they're not gonna be happy. And same way with cucumbers. They're a little timid. They don't like they're kind of like me, I guess. Now I don't really like the cold weather that much anymore.
Yeah,
You know?
me
And
either.
they don't. So they like it nice and warm. And even when it gets up to about 90 degrees, they'll still produce. They're not as quite as bad as a tomato, really not setting blooms. They'll still produce, but one of the most important things you got to remember about cucumbers is you got to have consistent watering with those. That's the quickest way to have, like yellow fruit on it or stress plants is not having consistent water. They like to have their moisture just right. They don't like to be soaking in it, but they got to have that consistent.
Right.
They don't like to dry up. Like a tomato, you go wet dry on them and you're okay. On a cucumber, they don't like it.
They don't thrive, and I think speaking of watering, one of the last time me and you talked, we talked
Yeah.
about pine straw.
Oh, yes.
And pine straw became really prominently used in my garden because of cucumbers,
Yeah.
because of anthracnose disease.
Right.
It would get started in the soil, and I would just water from overhead, and it would get splashed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I would water, you're spreading that around. So I used pine straw to elevate those lower leaves after the plant started getting up in size. It wasn't quite big enough where I could prune the bottom ones off and get them off the ground.
Right.
But I could prop them up and keep them off the soil, so that whenever I changed my watering practice and I started watering more at the soil level and kind of gently flooding the beds, so that I knew I was getting that consistent deep watering,
Yeah.
I was able to alleviate a lot of those disease type problems that are really common on cucurbits and squashes, melons.
Yeah.
They start, and once they get on there, we're growing in also kind of a wet season, and then water, rain splashes on there, and before you know it, it looks like somebody shot BBs through all your leaves.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's an interesting thing. That they definitely, pine straw works really well for mulching those cucurbit type plants.
Yeah. And again, it helping control the moisture.
Yeah.
In your soil, cooling it down when it does get hotter, you can make these plants last longer. And those cucumbers, when they're young and just starting, you know how they go. You can go out there one day and you can get your vines trained on your trellis. Go out the next day, you got something laying on the ground.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
they might have caught a little splash up or whatever, and then you bring them up and get them all hooked up, but they may have already got something on them that could cause some issues. So yeah, the mulching, especially with the pine straw, I'm a big fan of pine straw too.
It's
sold on
been.
that stuff, yeah.
I think it's done really, really well
Mhm.
for almost everything. I mean, I can't think of anything that I haven't had success
No,
using
me
it
neither.
with. When it comes to like planting, for you, are you direct sow the seeds for cucumbers, or sow them in trays and then transplant?
On cucumbers, I generally direct sow. I have done them like if I'm antsy about it, like right now, I go ahead and plant them indoors and get them up, and then I can transplant them at the proper amount of time. And so once you get a plant established by seed, a lot of times you can alleviate some issues that you might have by direct seeding. If you do it at the right time, with the right soil temperature and conditions, then you're usually not going to have any problems. Now, I'll overseed and then I'll thin out. But of course, if you have your own seedlings, that's probably the better route to go. Just in case you have some not optimal conditions and you got a good, strong, established seedling going, it may push on through as opposed to maybe not getting good germination out of your seeds because the weather went south on you or whatever. But generally, if I wait until it's warm enough, I don't have any issues with them germinating.
Yeah, I think if you're waiting till the temperatures are right, I think direct sowing gives you a much stronger plant.
Yes, I do too.
'Cause I really feel from personal experience and from just watching people buy transplants of cucumbers all these years, they don't always transplant well. And two, when I think about them, they grow so quickly that they're not like a tomato or pepper where I can squeeze out some extra time in those small cells. If they get too big, then they start getting real spindly and they get weakened.
Yes.
And then
They'll
you put it out.
Off, they'll do all kind of things.
And then I feel you'll be in the same situation where you said, you planted them early and then you planted some right out there and they surpassed them because they're not going to be stressed. Interestingly enough, unlike a lot of other plants, like if the temperatures are right, those cucumber seeds will germinate in 4 or 5 days.
Oh, they're quick.
They're very, very fast.
Yes.
So, if your timing right, then direct sowing to me is the only way to go.
Yeah. Well, the cucumbers, they belong to the muskmelon and the melon families and stuff like that. And none of the melons like to be transplanted.
Yeah.
None of them do. And cucumbers are the same. They're fussy. They don't like to be handled. As opposed to the tomatoes. Tomatoes, you can toss them up in the air. They love to be handled. They love to be transplanted. They thrive once you transplant them. But cucumbers are not like that.
No, they're definitely not.
So you're better direct seeding on a cucumber.
What are some other challenges that you think you've experienced when it comes to growing cucumbers?
Yeah, the probably the top of the list, most common one. People will tell me, "Hey, I got little bitty cucumbers with a flower on the end." And they turn yellow and they fall off. What am I doing wrong? I said, well, that's 99.9%. That's a pollination problem because cucumbers they have a male and a female flower. Of course, they'll make a little bitty baby cucumber, and you'll see a flower on the end. That's going to be the female flower. But prior to that, the first flowers on the cucumber is going to be your male flower. It's going to be on a single little stem and a small yellow flower, and then it's going to take a pollinator like a bee to visit each one of those flowers to pollinate them. And if you don't have a decent bee population, and sometimes even when you do, they don't get a good pollination. So you may make some, then all of a sudden you see some that are dropping off. And it's very easy to actually pollinate them yourself if you're not having good success. Only thing I can tell you, when you start doing that, you better get you a big basket and get ready to pick because they're going
to be everywhere.
They're going to be everywhere. And it's just basically getting a little paintbrush or a Q-tip and getting a little pollen off the male flower and just touching the female flower.
You can also see the difference, like if you look at the stem typically of a male flower, it's typically going to be smaller, and a female flower is going to be on a thicker stem because it's going to, ideally eventually support more weight, and the plant kind of knows the difference.
Right.
I think a lot of that too, you'll find that sometimes in some seasons that the male flowers are usually, from my understanding, one of the first ones to actually come on the plant, and then female flowers will follow kind of shortly after. And sometimes you see plants that drop their male flowers before you have pollinators.
Right.
And then you ideally really only need one male flower. And one male flower could ideally support more than one plant. But I think it's really important to kind of know and see the difference, so that whenever you're not getting fruit set, you can go out there and pollinate. Because I find that problem to be far more advanced and common in growing squash than I do cucumbers, but I definitely see people have issues with cucumbers.
Yeah,
And the
that's
same
just
thing.
that seems to be just the biggest one. And one, I guess, second place, really close behind, is and a lot of times this is as our ambient temperature is getting in the mid to upper 80s or so. People say, well, I mean, I get cucumbers and they're turning yellow on me. That's going to be a water issue.
Yep.
Again, that's another 99 percentile thing because they love that to have a constant moisture. And if you let them start drying out and you have fruit on the vines like that, they're going to turn yellow and hard on you, and they're never going to get better. And what's important is you got to remove that fruit. It's not going to change. You got to remove that fruit off of there because if you don't, it's going to start killing your whole plant.
Yeah, because it's still taking energy and
Yes.
resources away.
Yeah, just get it off of there, and then you'll be fine. Just keep the water going to it, and when it gets really hot, another good practice is to use a shade cloth, a 30% type shade cloth, where you knock some of that hot sun off of it for a few hours of the day, and you can actually extend that cucumber harvest season
A little bit longer.
Yeah, another month or so.
Yeah, it's a great option for shade cloth.
Yeah.
I always find like cucumbers, they're the plant. They're so prolific, but they're so good sometimes at camouflaging the fruit.
Oh yeah.
And you miss one,
I always miss
and
them. You get one about this big out there.
to me, I classify like picking cucumbers up there with okra.
Yes.
You got to have your timing right and picking them sometimes when they're a little bit younger, because if you let them stay on there too long, they when they get too big, sometimes I'll have them, they'll get kind of yellow on there. It's probably because they're not getting enough moisture because they've gotten so big. But another thing, if you cut open one that stayed on the vine too long, the first thing you'll notice is that the seeds are very, very large and far more prominent, because once it reaches a certain stage, it's just kind of like a plant that's flowering. It's in reproductive mode, so it's growing those seeds large with the intention of like that fruit dropping and those seeds being left behind. So you got to be really, really precise. Not precise, but you got to be paying attention and looking daily, because it's wild how you'll see something so small and then 2 days later it's like, double, and you're like, how
did I miss that?
Yeah, like how? Like,
I do it all the time.
It's like that wasn't the same one that I saw the other day, and it is.
And you look on the end of one when they get at the very end of their maturity, I guess, where they're overly mature, they'll start looking like they're opening it up on the end, like the end of a fig or something. What it is, it's in the seed stage, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's still draining resources from your plant, so you got to cut that thing off.
Get it off there.
Even though you say, "Well, I'm not going to eat that," well, take it off. And that way your plant will still thrive.
I find like that in cucumbers and eggplant, there's a lot of varieties, and there's many types. Cucumbers for sure. You see people I feel like there's 3 types of people that grow cucumbers. There's people that they want only pickling cucumbers. Then there's the people that are like old school, traditional. They just want the 8-inch slicing style. And then, over the past 20 years, like the burpless cucumber, especially like the Japanese style ones, like the Tasty Green is the one that always does the best for us in the retail environment. They'll get 18 inches long, but those tend to be the most popular overall. But I feel like each one attracts a different kind of person, and we see some people grow a couple different kinds, but
there's some interesting varieties out there, because for instance, if you go to the grocery store and you buy a cucumber, well, it's going to be a thick skin variety. It's going to be your 8-inch long and 1.5 inches in diameter, and you got to peel it to eat it because the skin's so tough. Well, that's a market cucumber. That's not something that you would grow down here. You want a thin skinned cucumber that you never have to peel, and so your burpless and your dashers and those like that, and you got the Texas pickling champion or something like that, and you can pickle any cucumber. Of course, some of them they've been bred to grow a particular way. So if you're wanting like whole dill pickles,
or making like spears, spears, like a pickling cucumber would be easier.
Whatever you want, and they're thin skinned, and the burpless, of course, going to have it's going to be a lot better flavor, and it's not going to have that that bitter taste to it. You know, there's no wives' tale. You cut the end of it off, and then you start rubbing it and then sucking all that stuff out of there. Well, you shouldn't have to do that on a burpless variety, which is really popular. And the thing about cucumbers, they're very nutritious. They're high in vitamin K, and they got a high content of phytochemicals, kind of like a tomato, that has cancer-preventing properties from consuming them. So that's another really great reason to grow your own cucumbers.
The Dasher 2s were always an interesting
Dasher
one because
2, yeah.
growing up, my grandfather, he always grew Dasher 2s, and he always grew the poinsettia.
Oh yeah, poinsettias. Yes, I grow poinsettias now.
Because for me, I always recommend poinsettias for customers who want a slicing cucumber. Because to me, they'll put a straight 8 to shame in production. Straight 8, I feel, is like the played out, old time of the poinsettia's so much more prolific. But the poinsettia's actually the pollinator that when you buy Dasher 2s, a lot of times you'll get like a percentage of cucumbers in there that are actually Dasher 2 seeds. So when you're planting them out, it's not uncommon to get different cucumbers in that set. And I always thought that was real interesting.
That is cool, yeah.
And I feel like maybe that's how he got onto those poinsettias, just because he's planting these here. But it's really interesting to see that because you got a hybrid and a heirloom growing together.
Well, I started planting poinsettias probably, maybe 2 years ago. I just happened upon them from some seeds I had acquired, and I said, man, I really like these things. My wife really liked them.
Yeah.
And they produce well. They're very tasty, easy to maintain. So that's what I plant now.
That's a good one.
Yep.
The only other thing that I think I want to touch on, do you have any suggestions for people that may be growing cucumbers in like tight spaces, small spaces, that don't have a lot of room?
Yeah, and that's what makes it great about growing cucumbers, because you can grow in pots, but you need to trellis them. I mean, you don't want them laying across the ground or anything like that. And some varieties, the poinsettia is not one that's going to grow to your seedling. I like those. Your straight 8s and your dashers maybe have bigger vines, but you can still, if you trellis them right and add height to it or whatever, let them keep on going and training your vines, you can grow in something just like you have right there. That's perfect.
I mean, and they do make what they'll call them bush cucumbers, but they're still a vine and they're still going to climb. But what they mean by that is it's been kind of hybridized to have a more compact growth habit and not go all over the place, but you still got to have something for it to hang on to and to support it, because it's still going to get heavy.
I like using my tomato cages for cucumbers at times, because I make them out of the remesh, and they're round and they're 2 feet in diameter and or 2.5 feet in diameter, and so there's enough room where you can plant them inside. When the vines get to the top, you can start training them, let them start going back down, and they get down to the ground. You start training them, let them go back. You can go zigzagging and then
everywhere, yeah.
And so you can control how much space they actually occupy, as long as you're harvesting them properly. You can grow them in almost any space. So they'll work great in a pot or a small raised bed, a little Vigo bed or something like that.
Yeah. And as we get ready to wrap up, like the one thing that I've never been knowledgeable on as long as I've been doing this, and it's mostly because I just personally don't care for them. Like, what you see people when they're growing eggplant. We'll backtrack to eggplant here for a second. But some people are married to the round eggplants, and then you have some people that only want like those Japanese, or like the old Ichiban, or now they have like the millionaires. They want those long, slender ones that are more shaped like a cucumber. Is there a taste difference in those? Do you know? Have you tried both types?
I've tried some of the others, other than your globe purple ones. Mm-hmm. I've eaten some of the longer green ones, and eggplants cooked with different meals, they're excellent tasting, but they're not like super flavorful.
Yeah, they're kind of more of an earthy flavor, I
Yeah, a
would
little
think.
earthy
Yeah.
flavor. Yeah, I guess that's a good and they're mild flavors. They're not strong at all, and you can use them in all kind of dishes, you know. And we love using them in different dishes. But so the longer the Ichabod, the longer skin one, I've had those before. I can't tell. It's a little bit different flavor, but there's not a great
Not enough
difference.
to like.
But it's kind of easy to it's easier to slice. You know, you get one that's kind of big, you end up with some real big slices.
That's I guess like I'm thinking like maybe people like those just because I know different cultures may prepare them differently and such. So
yeah,
maybe
like your eggplant parmesan.
Yeah.
You want
you want
pretty
to
good size
yeah,
slice, yeah.
absolutely.
You know, and then for the smaller ones, when you're making we make an eggplant casserole with rice and meat in it and stuff like that, and it's great for that.
That's awesome.
But again, it's very very high in vitamins and especially high in fiber too. It's a neat vegetable. I like it.
Cool. Well, I think we've kind of covered a lot
All right.
about both these things. So as we get into the latter part of spring, remember to wait till the temperatures are warm before you plant your eggplants and your cucumbers, because if you start too early, you're going to start over. I can tell you this from many other customers' experiences of all my years of doing this. Any last tips or tricks?
Yeah. Well, actually, while you were saying that on the wrap up, I was thinking, and if you have problems, you know, ask first before you start panicking and doing something drastic. And,
Yeah.
And a lot of times, just over the phone, or you snap a photo and text it or whatever to David and his staff or whoever. You know, ask some questions about, hey man, my cucumbers are doing this, my eggplant's doing this. What do I do? You know, I want to save it. A lot of times we can give you some tips that.
Yeah, so just something.
Just don't be afraid to ask.
Don't go into panic mode.
No.
Not every problem needs a drastic solution. So
Don't
sometimes
just jerk it out of the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Sometimes it's just as simple as maybe the way you were doing things.
Yeah.
You can alter some of your methods. Yeah, that's really awesome. So as we get into spring, hopefully, guys, you get some successful eggplants and cucumbers, and we'll see you on the next one.